Our guest today has served as alderman of the 42nd Ward for 4.5 years. Prior to being elected alderman, he worked for Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan as a policy analyst and as communications director. Following his nearly 7 years in state government, he was tapped by AT&T to serve as Midwest Vice President of Public Affairs. At that time, he was AT&T's youngest regional vice president. The smartest and best decision he ever made was to marry his wife, Kristen. They were married just over 1.5 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the City Club of Chicago, 42nd Ward Alderman, Brendan Reilly. Alderman.
Professor Green told me I'm in big trouble if Skinny's in charge of Q&A, so Skinny, be kind. I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. I know that this was originally billed as a lunch briefing, and I think people were expecting me to talk about the budget much like I did this time last year. Unfortunately, the lunch meeting actually was scheduled for the day we're supposed to vote on the city budget, so it wouldn't have been a very productive discussion. It's great to be back with you here. As you may recall, about 1 year ago, I was invited to come and speak to all of you. And just days prior, Mayor Reilly announced that he would not be seeking re-election. And that literally forced me to completely repurpose the remarks that I gave here to talk about what the city's prospects look like in a post-Reilly era and what we could expect from our city government and what kind of mayor we need. And then I got into a broader discussion, and I apologize, it was a long discussion, about a number of budget principles that I think we need to apply to the city budget moving forward. And I thought that in reviewing last year's speech, it might be useful for me to just take a few excerpts out of that speech and see where we are 1 year later. The City Club events are especially helpful to me. It forces me to do a 1-year retrospective. An accounting of how are we doing year over year. And that's exactly what I did in preparing to meet with you today. I think we can agree that over the last 12 months, a great deal has transpired in the city of Chicago. We've elected a brand new mayor, a brand new city council with many fresh faces and bright new aldermen. But I'd like to take a moment to read to you last year's observations on the qualities that I considered most important for Chicago's next mayor. And at that time, when I made that speech, no one had officially announced their intentions to run for mayor. And I quote, "In these past few days since the mayor's announced retirement, we've heard a lot about what skills his successor will need to bring to the job in order to be an effective city leader. The pundits and political observers are calling for coalition builder to gain council allies to support his or her agenda and avoid devolving into legislative infighting over local concerns and priorities. I certainly agree. But we've heard little about the other professional skills that will be needed to run the city of Chicago. Most importantly, we need a leader who can serve as a chief executive, managing people and resources efficiently. That CEO will also need to select a top-notch executive team and cabinet that will bring fresh ideas and a private sector approach to problem solving at the city of Chicago. We need people who can refocus the city's priorities and shrink the size of government to one we can afford. This means putting the right people in the right seats on that bus, matching management skills properly with city departments. We're not looking for a super legislator or a celebrity mayor who speaks in platitudes. Instead, we need a numbers-oriented mayor who understands basic management of large organizations, how to manage large budgets, and how to get the most out of our city employees. Regardless of the campaign rhetoric and promises made over the next 6 months, our next mayor needs to rebuild our city government from scratch and control our city budget. Putting more cops on the street, that costs more money. Investing in our neighborhoods, that costs money. Enhancing public transit comes with a price tag. Maintaining infrastructure, that has a price tag too. Until we're able to right-size our city budget and erase a massive budget deficit, any promises made by our next mayor are really nothing more than empty rhetoric that may never be fulfilled. So here we are 1 year later, with Rahm Emanuel as our new mayor of the city of Chicago. And I'm pleased to report he possesses many of those qualities that I just outlined. Is he a coalition builder? Absolutely. Mayor Emanuel hit the ground running when he was elected. and immediately had an open door policy with my colleagues, myself, and especially our freshman alderman. It was refreshing that he was soliciting us for our opinions and ideas even before he was sworn into office. And I think that was a sharp departure from the previous administration's style of governance. Chief executive, picking the right team, putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. I can tell you that Mayor Emanuel has done a fantastic job assembling a tremendously professional and talented cabinet from all over the country. These are folks that bring a broad range of skills and experiences to the table from every corner of the United States of America, and we've got fresh eyes looking at old problems and trying to help us identify solutions. That's probably the most important thing the mayor's done today, getting these folks in position to help us truly transform city government. Do we have a numbers-oriented mayor who's focused on managing large workforce? I'd say absolutely. Our new mayor is laser-focused on the bottom line and implementing real structural reform to our bureaucracy and our city's finances. Is he willing to enact tough budget reforms? You've all read the newspaper. We are in the business of reducing the size of city government, and we need to change the way we do business as we streamline bureaucracy to help erase a massive $640 million structural budget deficit. As I mentioned last year, our city has not experienced economic challenges like these since the Great Depression. But I don't see this as bad news. Like Mayor Emanuel, I see it as an opportunity to reinvent city government literally from the ground up. This is the time to hold the line on general taxes. This is the time to put the city of Chicago's budget on a strict diet. And this is time to force local government to live within its means. This is the time for the city council to step up to the plate in demonstration of political courage and real leadership to make the tough, painful cuts and difficult choices we need to get this budget back on track. The time has come that we make city government work for Chicago taxpayers rather than burden them more. As we examine Mayor Emanuel's proposed 2012 city budget, I'm very happy to report a number of the budget principles that I outlined here last year are core components of the mayor's 2012 plan. Last year, I outlined ad nauseum a whole series of principles that I thought we need to apply when we're putting together a new budget framework for our city moving forward. One of those areas that I focused on was consolidating responsibility within city departments, reducing the number of employees with overlapping jurisdictions and similar duties spread across multiple departments, cross-training our city inspectors to perform multiple inspections rather than sending a group of individuals to each administer their own. And I could tell you, Mayor Emanuel's budget proposal does call for cross-training and retraining of a number of city inspectors who can issue a broad range of citations across the municipal code. And we've seen a delayering. We don't have conflicting positions spread across multiple departments that essentially do the same things. I also advocated for streamlining middle management. I talked a lot about the manager to employee ratio at the City of Chicago. Last year, this time, it was roughly 1 manager to every 8 employees. And by contrast, in the private sector, it's typical for there to be 1 manager to every 15 or 16 employees. I tagged that as about $180 million sitting out there in middle management costs. By simply correcting that ratio, I argued we could get us down to about $90 million in cost. This mayor is putting the City of Chicago on a path to reaching that goal. This budget will eliminate many middle management positions, calling for the elimination of 400 to 500 positions and more than 2,000 vacant funded positions in the city budget. This will bring this total city workforce to a new recent low water mark of just over 30,000 employees, a significant reduction in headcount and the largest by far since I took office. There is much more work to be done in eliminating assistant and deputy commissioner job titles, but this is an excellent first start as part of a 4-year plan towards fiscal responsibility. I also suggested the city narrow its focus and focus on those areas of core competency that fit with the city's corporate mission. We have to provide for public safety. Mayor Emanuel, I think, has done an excellent job in reprioritizing the city's police department, working with Superintendent McCarthy to find more ways to get police officers off of desk duty and out into the street, protecting our neighborhoods. He's also looking at some difficult choices down the road related to the collective bargaining agreements and work agreements we have in place with the police and fire departments. We also need to maintain infrastructure. The mayor has a very aggressive water program that is a part of the 2012 budget proposal. And to be clear, that water program does not put a single nickel into filling our $640 million budget deficit. That money goes back into the water department and allows us to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure upgrades to our sewer system and water mains, many of which are over 100 years old. Promoting economic development. We've seen the mayor work very closely with Governor Quinn and our legislative leaders to negotiate fantastic reforms at McCormick Place that I think will serve our tourism industry very well, and I want to congratulate him for that. And just as importantly, Mayor Emanuel sent a message to business owners, large and small, that we are no longer going to penalize you for creating jobs in the city of Chicago. Mayor Emanuel has heeded the call from Alderman Tunney, myself, and several of our colleagues to finally roll back and eliminate the job-killing head tax. And I think Mayor Emanuel deserves tremendous credit for that. It's an aggressive schedule. We'll see that head tax cut in half by 2012, and then $1 removed the next 2 years, and make it go away altogether by 2014. This sends a strong message, albeit symbolic, to employers. Chicago is open for business, and we invite you to invest and create jobs here. The mayor is also working to shepherd community development, another one of our core missions. He has been working on TIF and CDBG funding reform with a sharp focus on return on investment and results. That has been something. Those metrics have never been established for these programs. Mayor Emanuel has made that a priority. I also talked about some of those services that fall outside of our core mission, those 4 critical areas that I just outlined. And we need to continue the conversation about shifting some of those services to other agencies, other units of government, and other providers in the private sector, potentially, that can provide them in a more cost-effective and efficient manner. I talked last year about the City Department of Public Health, and they do fantastic work on behalf of the taxpayers of Chicago. However, I argued our satellite primary health care facilities that we have throughout the city neighborhoods are redundant, and they are. If you look at the location of the city facilities, in some cases they're within a block or 2 of a county facility that provides literally the same health care to the same population. In other cases, these facilities are actually co-located in the same building with a county facility. That's a cost we can no longer afford to carry. At the time, I had suggested that our next mayor, whoever that would be, engage with the president of the Cook County Board and discuss the possibility of shifting the city obligation to run these clinics to county, who in my view does it much better. I can say that because my father was the chairman of medicine at Cook County for 20 years. But it's true. That's their core competency. That is not the city of Chicago's expertise. Mayor Emanuel, I'm very happy to report, decided not to go the Cook County route, but he went to federally qualified health care facilities, folks in these neighborhoods that provide all of these services at a significantly lower cost than we can do at the city of Chicago. And I think that's a responsible move. To be clear, these federally qualified health care facilities can provide the same level of service for 1/3 of the cost we're paying today. I also called for the meaningful consolidation of city departments. Last year, I talked a lot about the previous administration's decision to consolidate departments, and I applauded the sentiment. But unfortunately, if you look at the details, when those consolidations were performed, not a single personnel reduction occurred. No one was displaced or removed from those departments. So we had the same number of employees just working for a larger department. And I likened that to rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. That is not how Mayor Emanuel is approaching this budget. He's collapsing similar departments into one another. He's done some things that I think are going to bear a lot of great savings down the road. As I had suggested last year, he's consolidating the Department of General Services with Fleet Management. These will be the folks, the mega agency, that manages all of the city's most valuable assets, our real estate and our fleet vehicles. That consolidation is already in place and should result in significant savings. Mayor Emanuel has also presented a bold plan to further consolidate other city departments. He's dissembling the Department of Environment and placing its various key functions among other existing departments. He's collapsing the city comptroller's office together with the Department of Revenue, consolidating 2 offices with very similar key functions, eliminating significant upper and middle management costs, and streamlining bureaucracy and focusing on fiscal discipline. He's also merging the Office of Compliance functions into procurement and human resources, eliminating unnecessary and bureaucratic silos. And unlike departmental consolidation under the previous administration, This proposal also comes with meaningful reductions to the workforce, rather than simply merging departments without reducing personnel. And that's a refreshing change. I also advocated for moving the city of Chicago towards a paperless bureaucracy that focuses on expanding our e-services, making it easier to pay for services online, and to download all the city forms you need from the web, allowing for seamless online renewal of certain permits and licenses. Mayor Emanuel's 2012 budget proposal includes these initiatives, tasking the Department of Innovation and Technology with updating our city database systems with the technology necessary to allow them all to communicate with one another, so that no matter what department you work in, you can access a central database and gain the records that the other departments' inspectors have been able to compile. We also are focused on the urgent need for a complete overhaul of the city's contract policies. I criticized the contracting policies of the city last year and the bid practices across the board. I advocated for new approaches to managing bids for service, including managed competition between public and private sector employees, as well as the practice of reverse auctions for certain commodities and services to achieve the lowest possible cost for the best possible level of service for Chicago taxpayers. In fact, during that speech, I singled out the city's law department for its bad practice of outsourcing a tremendous volume of legal work to outside counsel. They did this to address issues related to the management of the department's heavy caseload. In most cases, I learned, we were paying these firms several $100s an hour, far in excess of what we were paying in-house counsel on an hourly basis. I argued the city should beef up its in-house attorney roster at a much lower cost of $85 to $90 an hour, and end the outsourcing of so much city legal work to private firms. I am very pleased to report that Mayor Emanuel's Corporation Counsel, Mr. Patton, is currently implementing this approach, and he's doing so aggressively, recruiting hungry, talented attorneys to work for the city at a much lower cost than the hourly rates private firms were charging us, to mostly result in settlement arrangements. This move should result in at least $100 per hour in savings on city litigation, which is a tremendous savings for Chicago taxpayers moving forward. Further, Mr. Patton has taken another important step. Under his direction, the city of Chicago is now settling far fewer cases. It's vigorously defending the taxpayers and pushing back on overly litigious trial lawyers. No offense to my trial lawyer friends in the room. His decision to fight these cases has already resulted in fewer claims being brought against the city. The word is out. Chicago is done settling cases. They're going to fight back. So lawyers, pick your battles carefully. When talking about these core budget principles, I did not only address the need for cuts and spending reforms, I also discussed the need to better manage the city of Chicago's revenue streams by focusing on a few key areas: code enforcement, citation and prosecution of violations, fee waiver reform, and TIF reform. These are areas where the city is literally hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars on an annual basis. As I stated last year, if you walk down any city block in the central business district, you will see literally dozens of violations going unticketed at any given hour of the day. And as someone with a mild OCD, it drives me insane. To be clear, code enforcement should be a priority because we expect people to obey and respect the laws and policies set forth by the city of Chicago. This is not about nickel and diming our way out of a massive budget deficit. As you know, many of our traffic and parking restrictions exist to expedite the movement of freight and commerce, or to alleviate traffic congestion or promote public safety. The enforcement of loading zones, tow zones, standing zones, cab stands, illegal bus idling may sound petty, may sound small ball, but it is critical to supporting our transportation policy. Parking and traffic restrictions are only effective when they're consistently and strictly enforced. Further, it is important that we increase the penalties for these offenses and update the fines for certain parking violations to ensure citations are taken seriously. By stepping up enforcement, we yield dual benefits. We improve code compliance and change bad habits, and we see a dramatic increase in short-term revenue to the city of Chicago. Millions of dollars in new annual revenue just from within the central business district alone. I'm pleased that the mayor's 2012 budget proposal does rely upon significantly increased enforcement efforts, as well as enhanced penalties and fines for various code violations and parking offenses. For some time, I've been advocating for a comprehensive review and reform of the current fee waiver program at the city of Chicago. Last year, I argued we need to establish reasonable limits to the amount of fees that are waived for charitable and nonprofit institutions. It is estimated that fee waivers for water, sewer, construction permits, right-of-way permits, and many others are costing the city of Chicago tens upon tens of millions of dollars annually. A serious concern, given that the cost of these fees are directly linked to the city's personnel costs. The fees charged for right-of-way approvals and cafes and business license are all directly linked to the cost of processing the application or the cost of the inspection. These are not arbitrary fee levels set to generate a profit for the city of Chicago. For decades, the City Council has routinely granted blanket fee waivers for institutions big and small without focusing on the actual total annual cost of waiving all of those fees. When times were good, this was not an issue. City coffers were flush, we were meeting our obligations, and could afford to generously support nonprofits by waiving their fees. Times have changed. And if you look at the typical family example, those families that are gainfully employed, paying their bills on time, almost always set aside charitable contributions to support good causes. But when times are tough, in our family budget, we need to scale back on our charitable contributions. What's worse, the previous administration never tracked the total cost of the hundreds of annual fee waivers granted by the city, meaning that there is no firm dollar amount associated with the cost of this program today. I discovered this about 1.5 years ago when I started digging into the fee waiver program. And I called the budget office where I expected this information to be housed, and it turned into one of these. Call this department. Oh, maybe these guys have it. What I learned was that each of the various departments that charge fees were tracking it on their own. And I can tell you, infrastructure and city engineers, accounting is not their core competency, and it shows. No one was householding all of this information into one central database, so we had a running tab on what all of this charity was costing the city of Chicago. And as a result, we've been hemorrhaging millions of dollars. The budget office under Mayor Emanuel has been able to quantify, with regard to water fees alone, we're waiving at least $10 million plus a year in water fees for nonprofits and charities. I'm thankful that Mayor Emanuel is focusing on this issue and has directed his budget office to provide us with a full accounting of all fee waivers across the city of Chicago, their cost to the city, so that we can consider placing some limits on these waivers, perhaps a cap on the maximum amount of fees waived for each institution, or applying a fair means test to separate smaller institutions from large, better funded institutions, but we have to limit the hemorrhaging now. His budget proposal addresses water waivers directly, eliminating free water service for nonprofits and instead implementing a graduated discount schedule. So under the mayor's proposal for 2012, you would see an institution that would otherwise receive its water for free paying a 60% discounted rate in 2012 for water. 2013, the discount would go down to 40%. 2014 and all years moving forward, it would be set at 20% discount of your water fee. This allows these institutions a 3-year period to transition off of this program and plan accordingly in their budgets to pay these obligations to the city moving forward. It's appropriate that nonprofits are exempt from paying property taxes. They provide important charity service, and that exemption saves them millions of dollars annually. But when it comes to city fees for service, we can simply no longer afford to afford unlimited charity by granting these blanket fee waivers. When it comes to TIF reform, the third component, I spent my first term in office working closely with my colleagues Alderman Flores and Alderman Wagaspak to fight for transparency and greater accountability in tax increment financing programs, with regular reporting requirements, online posting of TIF reserve balances, and detailed info on pending TIF applications. Truth be told, we have too many TIF districts in the city of Chicago. I agree with my colleague Alderman Wagaspak that we must conduct a detailed review of the city's 160 TIF districts, audit them, and determine which should be closed. As a downtown alderman, I've reviewed dozens upon dozens of TIF requests over the past 4 years, many aimed at providing gap financing for downtown development projects, and I've rejected most of those requests. I believe I made a new city first when I became the first alderman to oppose the creation of a new TIF district in his ward in the East Loop area of the city, along the river and Michigan Avenue. I firmly believe TIF should not be used to create winners and losers among building owners, or to artificially prop up rental rates in the downtown office market. TIF requests should be carefully scrutinized by applying a strict but-for test and should provide some substantial public benefit. Having said all of that, I am a very strong supporter of the TIF program. It is a very powerful economic tool that, when used correctly, can help us stimulate economic growth and redevelopment. It's most effective when we use it proactively to assist with particularly complex or challenging projects that directly address blight or promote the creation of permanent jobs in our neighborhoods. In recent years, TIF has been administered reactively. A developer wants help financing an ambitious project, and because large TIF funds exist, they apply for funding with the hopes the city will allow them to hit the jackpot. TIF allocation should not be made simply because the money exists and someone's asking for it. We must proactively identify opportunities for neighborhood stabilization and economic development, and we need to plan it. We need to map it out on a matrix and set benchmarks and goals for that program. We also need a greater focus on return on investment. What are the results? What are the positive impacts of TIF expenditures? By holding our TIF program and expenditures to the highest standards, we ensure the program realizes its fullest potential by spurring new development and growth in those areas that need it most in our neighborhoods. Mayor Emanuel, following the recommendations of his TIF reform task force, will be implementing many of these changes, applying a more stringent filter to TIF requests, more proactive planning with a focus on neighborhood stabilization, public benefit, and especially return on investment. In addition to these revenue reforms, Mayor Emanuel took the extra step in this budget by finally initiating the phase-out of the head tax. This is a major, major step forward for the Chicago business community. As you can see, many of the budget principles and priorities that I outlined last year are the building blocks, the foundation of our new Mayor Rahm Emanuel's 2012 budget proposal. So it should come as no surprise that I consider this proposal to be an honest, fiscally responsible document that makes tough choices to get our city budget back on the path to financial stability. In addition to crafting a politically honest budget document and action plan for the city of Chicago, Mayor Emanuel also deserves high marks for his administration's efforts to collaborate with the City Council and for his budget director's open-door policy to discuss budget options and adjustments with me and my colleagues. My city budget experience has taken a complete 180 turn from the previous administration. I can tell you that under Mayor Reilly, and you know we've had public disagreements from time to time, I was always called on last, 50 of 50 aldermen in every single budget hearing for the last 4 years, well after the media left the room. I also would receive responses to my requests for data or budget details weeks, sometimes months, after the city budget passed. Routinely, I had to vote against Mayor Reilly's budgets, and purely for philosophical reasons. The previous administration, in my view, relied far too heavily on one-time sources of revenue to try and correct a massive structural deficit in a city budget that is truly broken. What's the difference under Mayor Emanuel? From a personal perspective, I now serve as the vice chairman of the budget committee. That was a substantial change. In that role, I get to ask questions first, not last in our budget hearings. I also enjoy a very productive open-door relationship with Budget Director Holt and her staff, and have had direct conversations with the mayor personally regarding components of the city budget and some of the ideas that I have. And it's been an open dialogue, and this mayor is receptive to any idea, any creative idea that can help us get out of this mess. We also receive responses to our requests for data and budget details within a matter of hours, in some cases days, but certainly not weeks or months after the budget passes. And there's also a renewed spirit of collaboration and transparency in crafting a responsible budget document. No one party involved in this particular project claims to have all the answers or all the right solutions. Based on all that I've told you today, it should come as no surprise when I say that I strongly support Mayor Emanuel's efforts to reform city government, streamline our bureaucracy, to provide services more efficiently, and shrink government to a size we can truly afford. Let's be clear, this is truly an austerity budget, and many of the cuts outlined in the 2012 proposal are very painful to swallow. But there's a reason I support 98% of the mayor's proposed 2012 budget, and good reason that the independent and fiscally conservative Civic Federation has endorsed this 2012 budget proposal. We have a $640 million budget deficit. This administration's approach to correcting that issue is implementing major cuts and consolidations. That's going to result in $417 million in savings. That's 2/3 of our budget hole right there. Previous administrations would go and find assets to lease off or sell off and use the proceeds to do short-term fixes. Those days are gone, and we're moving forward with a more responsible package here. So we've identified 2/3 of this budget deficit can be closed through efficiencies and savings. The other third requires new revenue streams. We've done a very good job, I think, spreading that pain across the board. And every constituency in the city of Chicago that these revenue schemes touch have contacted all of us to let us know exactly how they feel. No one can endorse any one of these particular cuts or revenue enhancements on its own. We have to look at it globally. We aren't picking out one or two core constituencies and having them shoulder all of the burden. This budget, I think, equitably spreads that pain across the board. It also maintains the city's property tax revenues with no increase to general taxes, instead implementing targeted revenue increases and improving the collection of taxes and fees owed to the city. Little known fact, uncollected debt to the city of Chicago, $700 million. $700 million. We are going to be completely retooling how we go about collecting bad debt and going after scofflaws, and Mayor Emanuel deserves full credit for that move. We're also pursuing efficiencies in services using managed competition and reverse auctions for commodities to squeeze literally every penny of efficiency and savings out of our city vendors and contractors. If you had proposed that a year or two ago, people would have looked at you like you were speaking a foreign language. These are smart governing principles that the city needs to adopt. We're doing some test cases with our partners in labor, having public sector employees competing with private sector providers, and I understand that it's had a real impact on morale. The city workers competing in that competition are showing up to work every day on time, and they're eager to go and fight because they're proud of the work they do for the people of Chicago. That alone is changing the mindset with our frontline workers. We're also moving away from our reliance on one-time revenue sources and the lease of public assets. It eliminates roughly 90% of the city's structural deficit in the first year of this new administration. And this budget for 2012 reduces city personnel by nearly 2,300 budgeted positions, an 8.2% reduction in workforce from last year to just over 30,000 city employees. There are also particularly painful components of this budget, including proposed library cuts, mental health care clinic closures, and my colleagues and I are struggling to embrace those. Those are two programs near and dear to my heart. I don't blame folks for having an issue with these cuts, but we have no attractive options left. All of our choices are now between bad and worse. This is a critical moment in Chicago's history, a real opportunity for our new mayor and city council to get this right and truly reinvent and reposition our city government to compete at a global scale in the future. Now is the time for the city council to demonstrate real leadership and help this mayor make the difficult choices necessary to right the ship. One issue that I haven't talked about today, and I'm not going to because I've spoken too long, is the issue of pension reform. That is the major obstacle we're facing just a few years down the road. And no matter whether you're in management at the city of Chicago or a labor-represented frontline worker, we all have a common interest in getting pension reform passed and approved by the state legislature. What flavor or blend of pension reform, that's to be discussed and negotiated with our partners. But the bottom line is the status quo is broken. We can't sustain this model. And in fairness to folks in the pension systems, we want to make sure for people receiving pensions today that the system remains solvent. We want to make sure that people that are working for the city of Chicago today have a pension they can depend on when they retire. But the model itself is broken. So that's our next big challenge, working with Mayor Emanuel. If we don't address that concern, we're looking at an $800 million balloon payment in just a few years. Statutorily, even if we were dumb enough to want to, the city council could not raise property taxes high enough to meet that obligation. So something needs to give, and I know that will be a big part of the conversation in the coming months with our friends in Springfield. I look forward to playing a key role in helping Mayor Emanuel during his first term to reinvent city government and recalibrate its core mission to ensure that this remains a city that works and to best serve the taxpayers and the people of Chicago. I want to thank you for being here today, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you. See you, Paul. Hey, Skinny. How you doing? Be kind.
There's a couple up here. If anybody have any questions, if any questions, you want to bring them up. Just pass them up here.
Just don't read the tough ones.
They're all tough. Someone wrote a thesis here. First of all, I want to congratulate Alderman Reilly. Did a great job. I didn't realize that the city was so screwed up. Someone that worked there for so long.
Sorry,
but anyways, we disagree on some things. But anyways, want to congratulate Alderman Reilly. And I do want to mention that Mayor Emanuel has offered to do a breakfast for Special Olympics next spring. Or we're talking to Jay with the City Club. So I want to thank him for that. Real quickly, we have anybody else have any questions if you want to bring them up? One question is, why are property taxes going up and the property values going down?
Call the assessor. No. The city of Chicago is not proposing to raise property taxes. However, the Chicago public school system is. CPS is seeing a rapid and dramatic decline in federal and state funding support. And they have to act quickly. So part of the CPS budget does call for a property tax increase. There's also a disparity, well, not a disparity, but a lag in how the Cook County assessor basically assesses the valuation of properties. Because we're still on an outdated database, there's a 2 or 3 year gap. So your assessment may not reflect today's value of your home, but it probably does reflect your value 2 or 3 years ago, pre-economic collapse. So that's another reason why it seems counterintuitive. On paper, your property value has gone down, but your property tax bill is going up. Beyond that, I'm not a tax expert, but that's the simple explanation for what's happening there.
Very good. And is there any progress in the garbage and refuse grid system proposal?
Yeah, and because I was trying to keep my comments focused entirely on the positive about the budget, I didn't get into that. But if you're a condominium resident, you care very much about the future of the condominium refuse rebate program. The administration is very interested in doing away with that program over time. They believe that it represents a major liability for the city of Chicago year over year. The city budgets roughly $5 million a year for this program, but it actually costs the city closer to $9 million. And the more condominium associations we add, and that will happen once this economy improves, that number only goes up higher and higher every year. Personally, I respectfully disagree with the administration's position on the refuse rebate program. That's when I said 98% of this budget looks good to me. That's one of the components of that 2% that we're still working on. For me, it seems to be a matter of fairness. Downtown and high-rise and multi-unit condominium residents pay their taxes for garbage service, city garbage service. But the city of Chicago prohibits you from accessing those services if you live in a multi-unit building. As such, your homeowners association has to go out and on an annual basis contract for private waste hauling. So there's a major cost that goes with that, and you find that in your monthly assessments in your homeowners association bill. The refuse rebate program was put in place in 1984 to bring some fairness to the program, acknowledging that homeowners in multi-unit buildings aren't availing themselves and are prohibited from availing themselves of that city service. $75 per unit was what was calculated to be a fair rebate from the city for waste hauling services. The mayor is proposing, well, as of a week ago today, the mayor was committed to doing away with the program in 2012 altogether, eliminating a $75 rebate, taking it down to $0 for next year's budget. For those of us who represent a large number of multi-unit dwellings, we thought that that would be an incredible disservice to the homeowners associations that have very tough budgets to balance in their own right. So what we're working on right now is a transition, a phase-out, if you will, of that program over time, possibly a 4 or 5 year transition. We can't talk about what numbers will be in place, but the idea is to take it down a certain percentage each year at a modest level to allow homeowners associations to identify another revenue source over the course of that phase-out period. It's not optimal in my view. If I had 26 votes, we would preserve this program and keep it fully intact. But just by the process of running the numbers, there are not 26 aldermen who represent wards that have condominium associations that are facing this major issue. About 14 are. Leaves me 12 votes short. So rather than start a big fight, we're trying to negotiate in good faith with this administration, and I want to thank the mayor and his budget director for being receptive and working with us to try and find another path on the refuse rebate program.
Very, very good. You mentioned briefly you didn't want to talk about the pension, but the basic question is there a long-term solution?
Well, today, is there a long-term solution? No, there isn't. The legislature a couple of years ago implemented some reforms for new hires moving forward, but the truth of the matter is state and local governments aren't doing a lot of hiring right now. I just ran through this budget presentation and talked about all the headcount reductions we're implementing. So in the near term, those reforms aren't going to do a whole heck of a lot to help us with those unfunded liabilities, which, by the way, are now at $14.8 billion for the city of Chicago alone. That's about $5,600 per resident in liability for our pension system. So something has to give. We don't have a long-term plan now, Skinny, but what I'm advocating for is a very serious discussion in the coming months with our partners in Springfield, because something has to give now. This model, as it stands, is on a path for self-destruction. So something has to give.
This person basically wants to know, is the city focusing at all on a jobs program? You know, developing jobs.
Oh, sure. Just the reinvestment in the city's water system through adjustments to our water bills is going to provide hundreds of millions of dollars in stimulus. Thousands of jobs, construction jobs, going into our water and sewer mains and upgrading that 100-year-old infrastructure. I think we read in the paper almost every week, the mayor is celebrating some new headquarters relocation or the creation of hundreds of new jobs in a manufacturing plant. This is his absolute focus and mission for the city of Chicago. So yes, I think that this budget is focused on finding ways to create jobs. I think taking away the head tax is a good start, but we have a lot more work to do. But be very clear, Mayor Emanuel is laser focused on creating new jobs and investment in Chicago.
You were talking about consolidating city departments. There is a rumor about reconstituting the Department of Public Works. Is that still on the table?
I honestly haven't heard that rumor. I think the mayor still needs to save some tricks up his sleeve for the next 3 years of budgeting. But I do give him a lot of credit for making major structural changes year one. By making the very tough choices this year, we're going to take our structural deficit down from about $500 million to closer to 60 or 70 million. And that's something we can address next year and hopefully permanently erase our structural deficit. But again, this has to be a 4-year plan. We can't erase this gap all at once and fix these things with a magic wand. One thing I didn't talk about, Skinny, in this budget discussion was the need for us to finally get back to zero-based budgeting. And this is how the state of Illinois used to do their budgets a couple decades ago. But they would literally bring in an agency and start them at $0 and have them justify a request for every single headcount expense and every program they wanted funding for and whichever grants they wanted to apply for. We don't do that yet, and I wouldn't expect Mayor Emanuel to be in a position to do that. He came in the spring. He's going to need some time to get towards that practice, but the hope is in 2 or 3 years that will be commonplace when it comes time for city budgeting.
We got a question about the Office of Emergency Management, and it's about cutting employees there. Will that open the city up to more liabilities?
I'm not an attorney, and I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you, none of us on the City Council are excited about the idea of cutting positions at OEMC, especially in our call centers. These folks are frontline workers that provide an incredibly important service, and I've met with folks that work in these call centers. These are professionals, and they treat every call as if it's coming from their own family member. So making those tough choices that's a difficult move for us to make. But like I said in my presentation here, none of these options are attractive or good. None of us feel good about having to cut these services. But this is where we are. And in order to get this balance sheet corrected, something has to give. And unfortunately, that has a lot to do with headcount and personnel expenses.
And a question about the increase in the parking tax. The person says they understand that it has to go up, but is there any way to come up with a tax structure, a percentage rather than the crazy quilt work that the city has now, where you're paying so much here and something at another place.
We're actually looking for a little bit more clarity on the parking tax program. It's been positioned as a congestion tax, and I think you've been reading about it the last day or two in the newspapers. A true congestion tax is focused on managing traffic flow during peak morning and evening rush hours. So in other cities, they place a congestion tax or fee on those folks pulling into a garage facility, say between 6:30 in the morning and 9 a.m., and then leaving that garage facility around between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. This proposal would apply a flat $2 fee for parking downtown Monday through Friday. And in fact, it's just come to light, this would actually apply in any garage, not just to downtown. So commuter tax or congestion tax may not be the best way to position this. We are talking with the administration about some potential tweaks to that program. A lot of folks are confused about what it means for residential property owners who don't have attached parking in their structure or don't have a homeowners association lease with a garage facility. What does that mean for them? I know that the intent of this program is not to go after residents who depend on garage parking for their vehicles. It's intended to go after the commuters and the folks that bring most of the congestion and wear and tear to the central business district. So again, we have a few more days to work these things out. Monday is the last budget hearing that allows for amendments and adjustments to this budget. And the program is that a week from today, the full City Council will vote, hopefully, in favor of Mayor Emanuel's first budget. But there are several items that have some loose ends hanging out there. Certainly the garage tax is one, as well as the refuse rebate program, as well as potentially some modest changes to some of the personnel cuts that I discussed.
That's the end of the questions. Can we have a nice round of applause for Alderman?
Thank you.